Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Secret Sunday session. Today I am joined by Mia Findlay. Welcome to the podcast, Mia. Thank you for jumping on.
Thank you so much for having me. We were just saying that we got this done in December, which is a miracle in and of itself. So I'm stoked to be here.
Oh, it's crazy that even myself to think we can quickly sneak a podcast episode in before the end of year. And
It
I
was
think
meant
it's
to
a
be.
pivotal, it really is. And I think it's a pivotal time of year to start this conversation that we're going to start today when we're talking about eating disorders, body image, and in the world of disordered eating, which I feel we have much to talk about as it's something I'm very passionate about, and I know that you are. But specifically, I think we're coming into an environment where people think they know about eating disorders, they think they know about disordered eating, but do we really know what actually is an eating disorder and if we're tiptoeing along that line to having one? So we're going to dive into those topics today, but firstly, for my listeners that are not aware of who you are and what you do, who is Mia Finlay and what does she do?
So I apologize if I go into a monologue. I'll try to keep it brief. It's just been a series of happy accidents. So I recovered from anorexia binge purge subtype and have been recovered for well over a decade now. But I went into recovery and recorded a video the day I went to see my psychologist for the first time and just kept them on my iPad until I ran out of room, which led to me then popping them up on YouTube, thinking that no one would really be interested or find them. They're incredibly low quality. They're very, very badly produced. But people did find them, and that then pivoted my channel. I was never really, for an extended period of time, documenting my recovery. I got more into the advocacy piece quite quickly because a lot of what I was hearing was people were having so much trouble accessing treatment. I started learning about the stereotypes and stigmas versus how eating disorders actually present in people and how disordered eating actually presents in people. So my channel more so became about raising awareness and talking about eating disorders as a topic generally, more so than about myself. And that led to me working with the Butterfly Foundation as their ambassador for about 8 years. So they were the ones who actually introduced me to this idea of eating disorder recovery coaching, because I was working in finance, but I was speaking at these events and doing all this stuff, and people would come up and say, "Can I work with you?" And I was like, "What do you want? Do you want investment banking? Do you want private equity? What are we talking?" And so I found this space that made a lot of sense to me. I'd thought about going back and doing a degree in psychology, but I didn't feel like it gave me the bridge to using my lived experience the way that I wanted to use it and connect the way that I've been able to connect through my channel from this peer-to-peer level. I wanted to walk next to somebody through the practical stuff because that's where I really felt I had a lot missing. I loved my psychologist, but I would leave session and then have a whole week to keep everything together and to work on this and this and this and this. And one eating disorder thought could unravel all of it. So I wanted to be there in real time with people to do the practical stuff, and found the Carolyn Costin Institute and all the amazing work Carolyn was doing. Obviously, she's a giant in this sector, and was fortunate enough to be accredited with Carolyn, and have been working in the space now for 8.5 years as part of treatment teams, helping people to implement their goals and doing that day-to-day stuff with them. And we very quickly had a wait list, quite a long wait list. And so I was really fortunate to find two amazing women who now work with me. Holly, who's actually a former client of mine. And we've done amazing things like run retreats for people who are close to the finish line or are fully recovered. And Sophia in Dubai, who is an incredible coach. So they've been working with me for about 3 or 4 years. And yeah, just have been at this now for about 13 years, which is just wild. Without those little YouTube uploads, I don't know where I'd be, probably still in a very tall building in the Sydney CBD, hating my life in finance.
That's insane to think it all started with you just basically blogging your journey and sharing how the experience was for you. Do you
Yeah.
ever look back at those videos now and remember how you felt during those moments?
I do look at them sometimes. It's more so when it comes up to my anniversary, which I think about less and less. It used to be of really important significance to me, that anniversary of, 2 years, 5 years, and now it's up to 13 years. And I sometimes will put a little video together, kind of looking back and reflecting and doing a little compilation of progress throughout the years. And it's really like looking at a younger sister. I don't feel like I relate to that person as me. I still have some crossover with her, but I'm 38. She was 25. There's quite a bit of life that happens between there and here, including being recovered versus being in recovery. But I have a lot of compassion for her, and more than anything, just a lot of gratitude, because she has no idea what's going to happen to her. She has no idea how to get through this stuff. And when I made that first video, I just wanted to look back in a week and still be at it, like still be going to my next psychologist appointment. That was about as to the top of the mountain as I was looking, was just like the next little bit of base camp. So a lot of gratitude, I would say, but certainly just compassion and wanting to say, it's going to be okay. Like, you're heading in the right direction. Keep going.
We talk about that a lot in recovery. It's not the projection of the 5 years down the road or 12 years or when you're recovered, it's that next day or it's that next week or it's that next meal. And having, as you said, those little base camps to keep assessing at until like when you sort of get out of it and you realize there's so much more to life than that. And your world becomes so much broader, so much wider, and so much brighter. And I want to dive into recovery, but firstly, I want to talk a little bit about your journey and your story with your eating disorder. I can imagine you've done a lot of work in understanding how it came about, why you decided to pursue, say, disordered eating behaviors at the beginning. In doing that work, have you realized what set you up to be in a perfect environment to say let an eating disorder in?
I think perfect environment is such a great way to put it, because in the work that we do at Beyond Body, that's part of what we're helping people to, along with their psychologists, their important work in therapy, is to figure out their perfect storm, because I think that's where you can derive a lot of compassion from. And it comes down to, you are an individual. You can't line any two people up with an eating disorder and be like, they have the exact same story. They have the exact same path in. So my perfect storm was a combination of things, and things that I'm still learning about with a recent diagnosis of neurodivergence. But my understanding for a long time was the intersection of things like my genetics, that I definitely have a predisposition, that is for sure. Environment, absolutely. In terms of my childhood, I was 6 foot by the time I was 12. I was always the bigger kid. I was in a larger body as a child, so I was tall and I was in a larger body. So I was under a lot of scrutiny from my peers, but also from my family members. They would pick me up, they'd pick up a cousin who was older than me, and they'd make this big deal about, one of us being heavier, and it was always me. And even if there wasn't a direct negative connotation attached to that, kids just want to belong. They just are sort of striving to be average. They want to fly under the radar. They don't want to be pointed out as different for any real reason. And so there was this sense of just being too visible. Every time my body was commented on, the connotation to me was negative, whether that was the intention or wasn't. And bullying in primary school that was very much around my body. So then as I moved into my teenage years, I went through this process where I just suddenly wasn't in a larger body anymore. And suddenly the attention was positive. It was, turning 15 to 16, it was really positive. So I remember in real time, my brain going, oh, this is safety and this is belonging and this is how I can move in the world in a way that is actually positive. It's not even just neutral. So to me, that just became this baseline of, this is how I must be in the world, just for me to be safe and just to belong. And so I really felt like there was a lot of messaging that was coming from my personal life, but also growing up in that early 2000s, mid 2000s era. It's why I really enjoy working with millennial women, because there's this element of, we were in the early 2000s, like good luck getting through that period and not engaging with something disordered or not having your body image seriously impacted. And that's why I love the work that we do as well, because we're dealing with the micro of people's lives, but also the macro of helping them to understand things like diet culture, fat phobia, how they are profitable to so many different industries. And then in more recent periods of my life, at 37, and it's not an uncommon story for women, discovering that I am neurodivergent in a couple of different ways, autism and ADHD, and looking back on particularly my diagnosis of anorexia binge purge subtype, that makes so much sense to me now. The rigidity and then the chaos, the seeking familiarity and predictability and repetitive patterns, and then the ADHD, dopamine seeking, just chaotic behaviors, and that inevitable pendulum swing that I just lived in for years, and has really helped me to find another layer of understanding and compassion for that person who, even throughout my recovery, I still had that missing piece. I recovered without it, but I think it would have been enormously helpful to then be able to navigate recovery, because I still had some of those judgments of myself of like, yeah, I don't have an eating disorder anymore, but God, am I still rigid in some ways and super chaotic in other ways. It doesn't come through maladaptively. But yeah, it's been a really evolving thing. And I think that's the beauty of recovery, and what we try to teach people is you're not recovering to become a robot. You're not going to be recovered and then you're a fully baked cookie of a person and you never have anything to figure out, and you don't have any more personal development to do. But it's just really an avenue towards flexibility and compassion, and allowing yourself to grow and evolve and change as a person in all of the really good ways and all of the really complicated ways that we can be human as well.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it, especially when you look at recovery, because I think sometimes we have these ideas that recovery means full stop. You reach this point and then you're healed, you're good, you're done, you can move on. Whereas it's not like that. Like life doesn't have a full stop and it's ever evolving. And the beautiful thing, I think, as well, getting a neurodivergent diagnosis, I feel, and not in everybody's case, but in many people, I think, that have experienced an eating disorder, especially as you said, now that it's coming out and the research is coming more out in terms of women being diagnosed with neurodivergence and it being masking for many years,
Mm-hmm.
that relief as well. Because as you said, when you come out of an eating disorder, often I'm obviously talking from my own lived experience as well, is that when you come out, you still sometimes feel like there's this missing piece because you may have recovered from the symptoms of your eating disorder,
Yeah.
but you still have all these personality traits that are addictive and that are compulsive and are latching onto different things. And you think, so I'm recovered from this, but I still have so many things going on, and my personality is still wild, and I'm still feeling like I am on this yo-yo back and forth.
Mm.
So it can be really relieving and comforting for people to go down the path of exploring if neurodivergence is something that they do have or they have had, and I think it can really open up doors as well to know that there is nothing wrong with you.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's true of what we're learning about trauma as well, because when I look at some of my experiences in my childhood, my teenage years, my later teenage years, which is when my eating disorder really escalated, there were a lot of traumatic events that were happening around that period. And I think that we started to understand those intersections a little bit earlier than, say, the neurodivergence one. I think that we're really starting to grasp just how prevalent eating disorders are amongst neurodivergent people. But it's just another layer of us having to understand how complicated eating disorders are and why individualized care is so key. Because if we are just treating people's symptoms, we're literally just like putting them in for another round of the revolving door, right? We're just putting them back on the roundabout. And there is no full stop. There is no perfect end to recovery where it's like, okay, now your Hogwarts letter arrives and it's all done, and everything that you've experienced through recovery means that you'll never have another uncomfortable feeling or you'll never go through a difficult period. I was truly living under that fantasy a little bit when I recovered. I really wanted to believe that that would mean that I was kind of impervious, that I was safe from bad things happening to me or being let down by people or whatever it was. And then life really kicked me in the butt for a couple of years pretty consistently. And I remember sending an email to Carolyn saying, I knew I was recovered. I knew that deep within myself. But now that I've been tested sort of back to back and had these waves of really, really awful life experiences, I now know it like it's etched in stone somewhere, because it's not in the how perfect is your life. It's actually in how imperfect it can be. And you can navigate around that and you can be flexible around it, because flexible things aren't going to break, whereas rigid things will. And so when you come up against things, if you can be flexible with yourself, your compassion for yourself, how you cope, how you help seek, how you have boundaries, how you regulate, then you're going to more smoothly be able to traverse those difficult periods versus rigidly coming up against them and kind of fracturing every single time. So I think it's actually just a huge lesson in our humanity and how we need to be way more compassionate and way more flexible with our expectations versus heightening them to like, I must now be just completely rock solid as a human and nothing bad will ever happen and I'll never have another bad reaction. It's much harder to be a person than we
Mhm.
give ourselves credit for. And recovery just sets you up with a whole lot of really great skills and a lot of really great mindsets and viewpoints if you are given that opportunity. And if we're just teaching people to stop using behaviors, then we are definitely not equipping them with the skills and tools, which don't just get them well, but have the capacity to keep them well long term.
Mm. Why do you think we're not as inclined to be flexible? Like, why isn't it the go-to for human beings to just be more spontaneous, be flexible, be more carefree? Why are we prone to be more rigid and structured and want and seek control?
Because that's how the brain works, unfortunately. It's a computer, you know. It's with the brain is amazing, don't get me wrong. I mean, we know that we've only unlocked a certain amount of its potential, but it seeks out familiarity. It likes what it knows. And so if we are in a pattern where we've taught it to know something, that's what it's going to seek out. It's going to seek out repeating the same things over and over again, the same behaviors, the same responses, the same coping mechanisms, whether they're maladaptive or adaptive, it doesn't really care. It's the one that it's most familiar with. It's kind of like the program in the computer that runs the fastest. It doesn't mean that it's the best program. It just means that it gets from A to Z the fastest. And for us to interrupt that is really uncomfortable. For you to have this thing that you just do and then stopping that process, intervening and redirecting to something you haven't done before feels awful. It feels terrible, even if you've got all the evidence in the world that it is the healthier, more adaptive way to cope. And it is long term, essentially, how you want to cope. That's what makes recovery so hard, is not just stuff that's specific to people with eating disorders. All people are like this. How many people have we heard say, you know, I just want to wake up on Monday and feel different, or
Mm.
I just want that thing to come to me. Like, why can't someone knock on my door and that just happens? In order for change to happen, we have to make the change. That's obvious. But the deeper layer is if you want to even feel differently, you have to behave differently first. For you to feel ready, you have to make yourself ready. For something to be easy, you have to make it easy. For you to, make something go quickly, you have to be the one leading the behavior and deciding at what rate that's going to happen, right? And none of us are really wired for that. So that's why I think that recovery can be a gift in that it can teach you these amazing skills and approaches which nobody is taught. Nobody is taught how to maybe not choose their first thought, but they can choose their second one. That's a big part of what we do with clients, is this skill called dialoguing, where no, you can't choose the first eating disorder self-thought, but there is this skill we teach where, yes, you can choose the second one and the one after that and the one after that. And if you do that repeatedly, the first thought is going to eventually change. You're going to show the brain through the thought challenging and then the goals that we're working on with people to send up a different response. And so that big first scary eating disorder self-thought, your brain will learn, oh, she doesn't respond to that. Okay, she does this different thing now. We're going to stop sending that one up.
Mm.
Um, so that's why it's really hard work, is because put eating disorder in there or whatever else in there that's difficult to work on as a person. It's changing behavior, but it's also leading that with actively, intentionally changing your thoughts, leading your feelings in that direction, and making yourself intervene and redirect with stuff that feels safe to you. Even if you can see by all metrics that it's not safe, it does feel safe, you know. Just because something is predictable and familiar doesn't mean that it's good for you. But interrupting that can be really, really scary for people. So that's where all the compassion stuff is so important, and understanding how complex these things is so important. And watching someone go through this is so frustrating. But I think if we then understand those mechanisms of they are truly doing what they feel is the safest option for them, it's so difficult to witness that and not understand it logically. But these things aren't terribly logical.
And also not knowing how to help or what to do, especially if, you talk about that individual needing to be ready to pursue and initiate recovery. What what can people do, whether it's a parent, a loved one, a friend, and only wants to offer support? And often, we see it in this space as loved ones just almost forcing that young person or whoever is experiencing an eating disorder to recover, and they're just not there. How are they supposed to help that person, or are they supposed to help that person?
I think it's so difficult when it's somebody who's underage because you are responsible for their medical care. You are responsible for them as a person. So I can't, I'm really loath to kind of finger wag at people regardless of what they are trying to do, because they are essentially just trying to do the best for their child. And sometimes there are short term things that people feel they need to do to hopefully get that person engaged long term, right? But that, I would say that that's the thing, is like always keeping that as the goal in mind. That in order for there to be long term healing, this person has to get on board at some point, and they have to be collaborative at some point. But we can't force somebody to be collaborative. And if we give them the impression that recovery is this us versus you setup, it's very hard for that person to then see themselves as a person with agency and autonomy who's like going to take up the flag of recovery for themselves. It's very hard for them to then make that switch. And I see it. I have clients who come to me. I don't tend to work with under 18s. I have people in my team who do work with under 18s, but I have people who come to work with me who will express that experience of feeling very ganged up on, very othered, very much that sort of us versus them set up within treatment or even with loved ones. And there is a lot of work to do then as the professional to build up an extra level of trust that you may not with somebody else, and a constant reassurance of autonomy and agency. And part of the way that I do that, and not every coach will do this, but I think that's why this kind of experience, this demographic is drawn to me, because I will always say, if you don't show up to session, or if you say that you're going, you'll never get a follow-up email from me, ever. You'll never get a, are you okay? Is everything all right? Are you going to come back? I've just been worried. You're never going to get a sense that I'm guilting you, pressuring you, nothing. The door will always be open. That's a very clear and obvious caveat that I completely make very, very clear and repeat to them. But I'm never going to chase you up. You are an autonomous person with agency in this process. And if you want to engage in the support is here. But you're never going to feel like you're doing it for me, or to make me happy, or to keep me feeling like you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. This is your process. This is your life. So I think being able to emphasize the importance of collaboration, and that you are on the same team with this person, and holding the hope as well, being the person who they can come to, even if they're in that pre-contemplative stage where they're sometimes thinking about recovery, and then other times they're just not into it. They're not about it. They're not interested. They're expressing they have no interest in going down that path. To always be the person who they know they can come to if they have one of those windows crack open where they do have an interest, they do have some kind of motivation, they do have a curiosity. And to be ready with things like helpful resources, maybe a podcast episode you've listened to where you're like, I feel like they would resonate with that, or a great resource like the 8 Keys to Recovery, and just to dip their toes in and just be like, all you got to do is like read a few pages of a book and see if it gels. Like, no pressure, leave it with you. So just always being kind of that person who they know they can come to, they're not going to meet them with judgment or pressure or shame or guilt, and that they're going to emphasize collaboration, and that they can walk beside them through it, but you can't do it for that person, right? Which is, I think, scary for people sometimes when they're like, well, I want someone to do it for me. But then you're not really experiencing that true sense of autonomy and agency that I think a lot of people are seeking in recovery. So yeah, support, collaboration, and holding on to the hope, I think, is the most important thing that a loved one or even a treatment team member can do for somebody.
And looking at that in your practice, we talk about this term recovery. What are you looking for when you are seeing someone as being recovered from their eating disorder?
Totally. It's a really important framework for us as eating disorder recovery coaches because our job is quite different to the already established treatment team members that people would be more familiar with, therapists, dietitians, obviously doctors, psychiatrists, etc. And we've only been in the field for like 10, 15 years. And for us, the clearest defining thing for me in terms of is somebody ready to work with a coach is whether or not they appear to be in the action stage of recovery. That's how I refer to recovery coaching in that period of recovery, which means that by whatever increment, at whatever pace, they can move forward. They can take some kind of step. I don't care what that is. I don't care how minor or how major or whatever in between. If somebody can show a willingness and ability to set a goal and meet it to some extent. We're not doing knife's edge perfectionistic goal setting here. We do flexible, incremental, achievable goal setting, which means that we've got a good range. For instance, like we're going to add this to your snack 2 to 4 days this week, or what, just a, example. If somebody can move forward with a few goals or a goal, great. They are in that action stage of recovery. We build in rest periods. We build in what I call maintenance and management, which is let's just chill here for a second and reflect on how far we've come. We're not going to put our foot on the gas. We're just going to sort of reflect on how we got to where we got to. And then quite quickly, people are up and ready to go again when we build in that process. When it comes to being recovered, I don't put too much emphasis on being fully recovered in my work with people because I just want them looking at the week ahead. I personally would never climb Mount Everest, but I am going to use this metaphor. It's a little bit like guiding somebody up a mountain. My job is to look at the top of the mountain. Their job is to look at their boots because we're crossing crevasses on shaky ladders and I need them to be looking at what they're doing with the next steps. Occasionally, when we're somewhere safe, we look to the top of the mountain and we go, okay, great. Let's use that as motivation. We're this much closer. How did we get from that part to this part? Okay, how can we use that with the next bit that we're going to do? How can that inform what went well with what we've already done and how we apply that to the next things that we're going to do effectively? So I also emphasize that because it's going to look and be different for everyone. When we look at things like trauma, when we look at things like neurodivergence, when we look at different people's different access to resources and support, right? So it's not up to me to define what that is for anybody else. It's also not up to me to decide where somebody wants to get off on the train, right? When somebody comes into work with me, it's not, well, now that you've signed, well, you're going to get to full recovery, or else it's like, oh, you can come and go as you please. And when we loosen those expectations and we loosen that, what a concept, when we loosen rigidity when it comes to recovery with someone with an eating disorder, they actually do better. When we take away all of those expectations, the motivation is there and the long-term sustainable work is just much more accessible for them. But a few key things, and when we look at Carolyn's definition of fully recovered, which I really like, it doesn't have anything with weights, it doesn't have anything with BMIs, it doesn't have anything with, how much food you eat or when you eat or whatever it might be. It's really about your relationship with yourself, and it's really about your treatment of yourself and how you cope and how you respond to different stressors, anxieties, all that sort of stuff. And so that, I would say, is my biggest indicator that somebody is fully recovered, is more so the holistic stuff. It's, yes, we've done the food stuff, the behaviors are gone, the thoughts are gone, there's no more thoughts to dialogue, there's no more behaviors to, urge surf through, distract through, help seek through. It's much more about how aware are they as human beings of their needs. How good are they at identifying those needs as they come up, and now just instinctively turning to something adaptive to cope with them. When they get cut off in traffic, or if they have a day where their boss is being terrible to them, do they pick up the phone and vent about it to a friend? Do they go home and put on a candle, regulate, have a warm shower, make themselves something nice for dinner, say, I'm so tired, I need to get some really decent sleep tonight, tomorrow is a new day, versus that first response being something maladaptive, something that works against them, and them having to even fight against that. It's like I said earlier, it's the not just getting well stuff, it's the keeping well stuff. It's how do you talk to yourself? How do you talk yourself through anxiety? How do you soothe through it? How do you regulate through it? It's what I refer to as awareness, intervention, redirection. And that's what we're doing with people is very often we're just waking up their awareness as they're about to use a behavior, right? Like that's when they're first aware that they don't feel great and they feel really dysregulated. And what we're just teaching people over time is we just take that awareness point and we're just dragging it earlier and earlier and earlier in the process to where they first became anxious, to where their first thought maybe wasn't very kind to themselves. And when we pull it further away from the eating disorder behavior, we show them that eating disorder behavior isn't inevitable. And it's just how your brain has taught itself to cope and respond. But actually, this is the point where we need to become aware. And there's all this other stuff that we can do so that the eating disorder is kind of put out of a job, right? We don't need to get to the point where we're so dysregulated that we just need something to numb and sedate and avoid those uncomfortable, escalating feelings. So yeah, it's people being able to identify their needs, meet them in a way where we can see consistently we have just put those maladaptive skills responses out of a job, and that they're not white knuckling it, right? I think that people are surprised by that recovered isn't every day holding on for dear life to being recovered. It is just, it's quite boring. I have to warn clients sometimes, like, it's actually quite boring. Like you just get to the, and you see it in clients where just every week you have less and less to talk about. And then they're like, Mia, I just need to go and kind of live my life. And I'm like, great. Okay. And it just then becomes funny to them when you remind them of, do you remember when I asked you to do this and it looked like you wanted to slam the laptop closed on me and never come back? And they're like, I did want to slam the laptop closed and never come back. And they're like, oh, I just can't believe that I ever felt that way. So I think it's very hard for people to envision feeling differently down the track than they feel now. They very often think that things are going to happen, like their behavior is going to be taken away, or for some people, like their body's going to change, but their brain is going to be the same. And it's like, this is why I think that some very old school approaches to treatment have really let people down, where that's what happened for a long time. People's behaviors were taken away and they were forced into physical changes they weren't ready for. And they were given no skills and no rewiring for their brain to catch up and go, not only am I safe, but life's actually way better. And I don't actually need all that stuff that I used to do. And I've proved all those fears wrong. And so now I can respond in a different way. And the big scary thing is not coming.
Do you have any tips or advice for people that are dealing with, say, in anorexia, for example, that the weight gain is such a big issue for a lot of people
Yeah.
going through recovery and can prevent them from pursuing recovery?
Yeah.
How they deal with that, how they navigate that issue?
One of the top things I teach people, because I'm really passionate about body image, when I went through recovery, there was really nothing for body image. They'd tell you, we'll do it at the end. And then you'd get to the end and they were like, psych, we're not, because we don't have anything. It's like, okay, great. And so I went searching, and I remember being out and about one day and thinking to myself, I just don't want to think about my body that much, because the big thing at the time was body love, which is great. Don't get me wrong. Body love is great. But the way that it was being marketed was like, you love your body all the time. And I was like, that seems really unrealistic. I am logical before I'm anything else. I was like, that is just not possible. And to me, the idea of thinking about my body all the time so I would love it all the time felt very similar to the amount of time I'd spent fixating on and thinking about my body when I hated it. Regardless of the feeling, the thinking about it all the time and the focusing on it all the time was the problem for me. I just didn't want it to take up that much of the pie chart of my focus, my worth, my sense of self, how my day was going to go. I just didn't want to think about it very much. And that's when I came across body neutrality, which is much more a practice than it is a feeling. And for people in recovery, when we're teaching them body neutrality and those practices and tools, the most we're asking them to aim for is tolerance. But long term, the experiences you have with body image is various. It's indifference, it's tolerance. You experience moments of like and love. You experience moments of gratitude. It's a whole lot of experiences, because that's the whole point, is that what we're aiming for in body image is to have a variety of experiences. I encourage people going through recovery to think about long term, short term and long term, to think about their relationship with their body and body image like they do with people, where we're not, just like we were talking about with recovery isn't about reaching this perfect robotic outcome as a human being once you're at the end of the process. It's actually trying to be much more flexible than that. It's the same thing. When you think about the people who you love, you're not always on the same page with them. You're not always aligned with them. You don't feel the same way every single day about them. So why is that expectation of body image? Like, clients will tell me they have these secret goals of like, I just want to get to the point where I love my body all the time. And I'm like, well, then you are just going to keep running into that hurdle and smashing into it and hurting yourself with that hurdle. Versus if we realize that that's not going to happen for anyone, even someone who's never had an eating disorder and has the best body image in the world, that is not going to happen. So thinking about it more like a relationship. And if you think about it through that lens, then you'll work on it like it's a relationship, that it's something you have to keep working on. The body changes. Since I recovered, I developed 2 chronic illnesses, stage 4 endo and psoriatic arthritis. I have had to be very flexible and compassionate and adaptable in terms of my relationship with my body. I was 25 when I went into recovery. I'm 38 now. I have very different experiences with my body than I did when I went into that process. If I'd said to myself, well, I can stay recovered long term if my body stays the same and if I feel the same way as I did at 25, well, I would have relapsed over and over and over and over again, right? So it's about the overall expectation of your relationship with your body and how body image is going to go, and that it's very varied. What we want to do for sure when I talk about that spectrum is we want to cut off the distressed end of the spectrum. That is not normal. That is not ordered. It is not ordered to go into or live in and stay in a part of the body image experience spectrum that is that distress, that hyperfixation, that constant thinking about it, the constant body checking, body monitoring. So that's the overall relationship with body image work that we're doing. The specific stuff we're doing, the tools and skills we're teaching people, is one I just mentioned. And that's, I think, the most important one that we do with clients is reducing and stopping the body monitoring. If there is any skill or tip of all that body neutrality stuff that I could give people here, it is to start intervening and redirecting with the body monitoring. Without a doubt, it's the most destructive body image behavior. And it's one that people aren't even fully aware they're doing, because body checking, body monitoring very quickly becomes subconscious. You don't even realize you're doing it. Clients who even say to me, when I get them to do a body checking log 1 day a week just to bring their awareness up, because we can't change what we don't acknowledge. We can't acknowledge what we're not aware of. So much of this is just like making them aware of just how much they're doing it, because they'll say to me, oh yeah, no, Mia, I know I body check. I already know that. And I'm like, well, let's just see how much, because you might be doing more than you realize. And like, no, I think I'm aware. And then this list comes through and they're like, I had no idea. I had no idea how bad it was. And what that's doing is it's setting off an alarm, and you're kind of leaning on that alarm all day, and you are distressed by that alarm all day. It's like if there was a car outside right now and the car alarm went off, right? For the first hour, I'd be really aware of it. It would really annoy me, but my brain could not pay attention to it consistently for that long. It would start to drift into the back of my head, my awareness of it, right? I would still be able to move on with my day, but this thing would still be gnawing and nagging away at me. But I'm not aware of it enough that I would move rooms or put in headphones. And so by the end of the day, I would be so wound up and so frustrated, and I wouldn't even know why. That is what body monitoring does. So a few examples of body monitoring: the obvious stuff, mirror checking, going to a mirror or multiple mirrors, one after the other. That's what I used to do. I used to go and check every single mirror on the house and then just keep going and going and going and going.
Just make sure they all look the same. Yeah.
That's exactly right. And be like run to the next one to be like, in case my body can change in the next 4 seconds, I got to get there as quickly as possible.
Things we do.
So that can be intentional. It can also be unintentional, going and washing your hands, and that can unintentionally turn into a body check. You don't even realize you're doing it. Photos are a body check, current and old. Sometimes even people flicking back and forth, comparing old photos, new photos, comparing to other people, walking into a room and trying to figure out where in that room your body sits and where you kind of can put yourself as far as what you look like, focusing on somebody else's body part and comparing it to a body part that you're really hyperfixated on. Touching, touching surfaces of your body or checking the circumferences of certain body parts. All kinds of stuff that we do, right? All kinds of, in the shower, looking down is a big one. So there's all kinds of stuff we do, and what we're teaching is short-term avoidance. It's not long-term avoidance. We then want to build the bridge to some more healthy embodiment and being able to reintroduce those things, those, mirrors and that kind of stuff. But we do spend periods of time where we're kind of taking away those access points for this compulsive behavior, so that you become aware. Because when you cover a mirror and you're so used to body checking there, you will become aware. Your eating disorder will start going, I want to check, and you'll feel that strong urgency and that compulsion. So that when we reintroduce it, when you've had a bit of a break from it, you then have a choice back. When you go to that mirror, are you going to connect to that from your healthy self and just quickly turn and see, do I have a run in my stocking? Great, that's what that mirror is for. Off we go. Or are you going to choose to linger and stay there and let that turn into a body check and set off that alarm again? So it's really just about breaking a compulsive behavior and then intentionally reintroducing those access points so that you have that contrast of what does it feel like to interact with a mirror from my healthy self, to interact with clothes from my healthy self, to walk into a room from my healthy self, versus when my eating disorder self is leading the charge on that. So long answer, but the body image is so complicated. Yeah. And we have to come from that angle of it is really complicated, but in some ways, especially behaviorally, it's actually quite simple. And then it's about finding the ways for you to relate to your body and experience your body in a more embodied, healthy, self-centered way, which is just going to, again, be specific to every person going through the process.
It's interesting listening to those, body monitoring tools and sort of things that we do engage in. And I can imagine a lot of people listening to this going, I don't have a diagnosed eating disorder,
Yeah.
yet I do that.
Yes.
And I think that brings the question of where is that fine line? Like what is associated with disordered and what is something that is somewhat the normal human experience?
This is why I don't talk too much about diagnosis and non-diagnosis. Even with clients, I came up with a term called behavioral profiles, which just made much more sense to me. So when a client comes to see me, I don't ask for their diagnosis. I might already know it because I've been referred on to by a doctor or their psychologist or whatever it might be. But when they come and talk to me, I want to know about their specific behaviors, because even within those diagnoses, there's not a lot of overlap with every individual person. Like someone with anorexia binge purge subtype like I had, when I see clients who have that, they don't have my exact behavioral profile, my exact symptoms and how they express themselves, or the timing with which they showed up. Like I was in a very repetitive pattern every week. They have a very different experience with it. So it also, I think, then broadens the way that we can capture people, because people who feel like they do just have disordered eating, and even the way I just said that, just have disordered eating, that's what they'll say to you. And that's not really interesting to me. What's interesting to me is, but is it working for you? And do you want to change it? And you don't have to wait for it to be something which sits in one of those diagnosis silos for you to be worthy of help and for you to change something that might be causing you distress or discomfort, or that you just want to change. So I understand the importance, especially when we start to get into things like hospital systems and when there's medical things to address across those different diagnoses, why some of those labels are important. But I think when we're in an outpatient setup, we're talking about individualized care, right? Like people have resourced themselves for their recovery, not where they sit across this spectrum of what's going on with other people. And the other thing I think it helps challenge is we know that people can have a certain attachment to some of those labels and some of those from an identity perspective, but also from sometimes it's the thing that makes them feel special or makes them feel like they have worth or value, and it's something that they really put on a pedestal. And so moving away from that language, especially with a treatment team member, I think can be helpful for them to start challenging why they do that. And sometimes it can make them feel uncomfortable, whether like they want you to use the words and you won't. And then you go like, well, let's talk about that. Why do you want me to use those words? If I don't, what does that mean? So yeah, I think that I think that that's when we look at that spectrum of like, let's put all the behaviors on there and let's put some of those body monitoring behaviors on there, or chronic dieting. That's not necessarily an eating disorder, but I will have somebody come to me who's like, oh, Mia, I don't really have a problem, but I do want to change this thing because I find that for the last 30 years, I have gone through these chronic dieting cycles. And that's so worth addressing. That's so worth getting help with. But they still, if they went to the doctor would be like, no, that's all fine. That's not a problem. But the one thing we don't have a test for is like, what is it like to live up here? How does it feel when you do those things? What are you telling yourself? What are you telling yourself about yourself? What does that do to your self-worth, to your identity, to your sense of self, how you show up in the world? Does it put limits on what you're allowed to do and how you're allowed to show up? So it can be tricky because we don't want to go around calling everything disordered eating or an eating disorder, which is why I think we need to acknowledge that there is a lot of disordered stuff out there which is labeled as normal. But the thing that I like to remind people of is that just because something's common doesn't mean it's normal. And if it's something that's causing you discomfort or distress, and if you have a question mark over it, I think a really good litmus test is, are you listening to this? It's like when people come and find my content, they're like, I don't think I have a problem. I'm like, well, I have seen your name in my notifications for about 3 years. And I talk pretty much about eating disorders all the time. That's a good litmus test that there could be something here worth exploring, right? If you are curious about it or you have questions about it, it doesn't hurt to come and have a chat to somebody. And you don't have to commit to anything. I will have people sometimes who come to me and they want to bounce things around and just ask some questions and go away and think about it. And then if they come back, I might help them build a bit of a team or refer them on to somebody who I think could be more helpful to them than what coaching could do at the moment. But it's a really grey area. But again, it's why I have such an emphasis on individualized care. I don't really care if you tick a bunch of boxes in the DSM-5 or even on a disordered eating red flag list. I want to know how you feel within yourself and if there's anything here you want to change.
Do you think that's hard to find or acknowledge within an individual today when, say, we engage with platforms like social media, Instagram, let's say in particular, that are selling us concepts in the marketing space that eat this, eat that, exercise this way. And for a person that's consuming this content, whether they're taking it in consciously or subconsciously, they don't see any wrongdoing, or they don't even see that, say, even if it is causing them stress, they don't see it as something that should change because everybody seems to be doing it.
Yeah, I think that there is an element of that. I'm not as cynical as some of the, cynical might be a strong word. I am, of course, concerned about the return of things like, the super skinny beauty ideal that we're seeing a lot of chatter about at the moment. I am obviously concerned about the role of social media in all of that, certainly. But I've been around now for long enough to know that I've actually never seen people more literate in this space. When I was first making these videos, so I have talked about eating disorder, but I've also done a lot of content around diet culture. And whether people liked it or not, calling out certain people who were selling people diets that were the equivalent of the calorie intake for toddlers every day and ridiculous exercise. Like I was doing that more than 10 years ago and getting death threats for it, and having people have these strong responses to calling out things like fat phobia and these really damaging practices. And over the years, I've had a lot of those people come back and be like, I did not understand what you were talking about. And now I do understand what you're talking about because a lot of these concepts have become much more mainstream. A lot of this terminology has become a lot more mainstream. And I look at Gen Z talking about this stuff and they are really literate in ways that we were not, that like millennials like myself were not. We just did not understand that we were breathing in fumes and thinking it was air, but it was fumes. So I actually think that we need to empower those people to, to continue having those conversations and to call out those specific examples of what they think is really damaging without leaning into sort of targeted individual blame on. For instance, we're seeing a lot of commentary at the moment around, celebrities who seem to have gone through a lot of weight loss in the last 12 months or so, and pointing the finger and being like, it's that simple. It's, they're a bad influence. And so that's how simple it is. It's so much bigger than that. It's structural, it's systemic, it's patriarchal, it's all of these really complicated things. And let's be honest, the last 70 years, the beauty and body ideal has been small. It's just been small in different shapes, like the BBL era or Twiggy in the 60s. Like, it actually isn't that drastically different. So I think that we need to lean more so into the idea that people are actually more literate than we realize, and we just need to resource them and connect them. Like, I see a lot of commentary about these issues, but no resources mentioned, and no links to, if you think you have a problem, there's this or there's that. And we also know that we've got some really great foundations in the space, charities in the space. We've got some really good public people myth busting and doing some really good work in this space, really good podcasts, really good literature. So I think it's just more so about making those more visible and connecting people to those things when we're having these conversations. Sure, call out the really unhelpful diet culture rhetoric or the really unhealthy body and beauty image ideal, but then point people to solutions, I think, is what is missing. And because what we do is then we, as much as we're criticizing the glamorizing of diet culture and glamorizing of certain beauty and body standards, without then having a productive and constructive conversation, we're then just kind of sensationalizing in a similar way, right? And it just seems there's a real flattening of this conversation which is going on, which feels really reductive. But yeah, I think that it's just making those resources and those access points much more visible and available to people. And that is often going to come down to things like funding, awareness, amplification, all that kind of stuff, and just not falling into the trap of oversimplified conversations about a very complicated issue.
I couldn't agree more. As you said, we're having a lot of conversations and really becoming a lot more educated in this space around eating disorders, disordered eating, and certain behaviors. It's like, just what are we going to do next about it? And that's, I think, where our next issue lies in this space is how do we, as you said, give people accessible and reasonable information and resources to be supported through it. Because you said, unfortunately, trends and that they keep on their cycles and it's not going anywhere. So we just need to find better ways to be able to support ourselves and the people around us. But this has been an absolutely incredible conversation. Thank you so much, Mia, for jumping on and sharing everything about what you've learned through your personal experience to what you're doing in your business, and the knowledge that you have learned, I think, is so powerful. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ashley. I really, really appreciate it. It's been lovely chatting with you.
Before we do turn off and say goodbye, what is one tip that you would give to someone or anyone that is listening to this that maybe are feeling quite distressed? Where do they start? What do they do?
I think the most important thing is to go out and find that care that's suited to you, finding the support, the professionals, whatever it might be. And if that all feels a bit too big and scary at the moment, I think one of the most important things we can do is just to start becoming literate and understanding what might be going on with you, and reaching out to some of those supports like the Butterfly Foundation. They have a chat function. If you don't want to pick up the phone and have a call, that can be a bit confronting, just to start to bounce around what might be going on with you, what some of those concerns are, and what might be possible for you. It doesn't mean that you have to commit to anything. It doesn't mean you're signing on the dotted line to get on the train and go for the full journey. It just means that you have a little bit more information, and in this process, knowledge is power.
Amazing. And where can people find you if they want to engage or see you?
If you look up What Mia Did Next, you're going to find me pretty much everywhere, on Instagram, on TikTok. We also have our 2 podcasts over on YouTube. So we've got Beyond Body, which is the same name as my business. And Holly and I do that fortnightly, where we're just answering your questions and hopefully providing a little bit of hope and insight and humor. And if you'd like to come and work with us, you can find us at beyondbodycoach.com. Like I said, as myself, Holly, and Sophia. And in the new year, we'll probably have some spaces opening up for coaching if anybody is interested.
Beautiful. Once again, thank you so much for jumping on today. I can't believe I'm saying this, but have a very Merry Christmas and a wonderful New Year. And same to everyone else out there that is listening. Thank you so much for jumping on and listening to Mia today and starting this unique conversation. We'll chat to you guys all next time.